So as a leader, we need to build an environment of honesty, integrity, and representing ourselves truly, authentically.
This episode is sponsored by Therapy Notes, therapynotes.com. Be sure and check them out, and be sure and use the promo code Gordon, Gordon, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. Over 15 years ago, when I started my private practice, I had to learn a lot, and most of it the hard way, and I don't think you need to do the same. Hi, I'm Gordon Brewer, a licensed psychotherapist, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. Join me in this journey of discovery as we have conversations with other leaders and professionals in both the mental and allied health fields. Join us as we explore both the business and clinical sides of running a private practice.
Hey, this is Daniel Fava from privatepracticeelevation.com, and I just want to say a big congratulations to Gordon and his 300th episode of his podcast, The Practice of Therapy. I am just so thankful for Gordon and just the resources that he shares, but I'm also thankful for Gordon for the support that he's shown me in my own business building journey. Gordon was one of the first people that I connected with back in probably 2017 when I was just starting this work that I do, website design and development for private practices. And I think I was interviewed on his podcast pretty early on. And yeah, he's just shown me so much support around throughout the years. And I'm thankful for you, Gordon, and just thankful that you just keep putting out just amazing content. So congratulations.
Hey, Gordon, this is Chris McDonald from the Holistic Counseling Podcast. I wanted to say congratulations on your 300th episode. That is amazing, and what a milestone. Thank you for your continued support for me and all the others in the Psychcraft network and all the other therapists that you're helping by putting this podcast out into the world. I know I've learned so much from you and continue to do so. And I know so many are touched by what you're providing. I hope you find a way to celebrate because you deserve it.
Hi, my name is Steve Bisa, host of Finding Your Way Through Therapy on the Psychcraft Network. I want to simply congratulate Gordon Brewer on his 300th episode of The Practice of Therapy. I've been listening for a long time. I was on episode 262. Thank you, Gordon, for that. But it was such an awesome experience, and I've been listening for so long that he is just an amazing guy who just wants to help people, has really helped a lot of therapists, and has always been there for others. So, Gordon, congratulations on 300 episodes, many, many, many more to come, and thank you for everything that you do for us as therapists. And I don't want to be the voice of all therapists, but nonetheless, I'll be at least part of the voice of therapists. Thank you, Gordon, and congratulations.
Hi, Gordon. This is Karen
and Melissa from Survival 101. Thank you so much for the incredible wisdom and compassion you have shared over the years through your podcast.
We are truly honored to be part of the Psychcraft network with you and hope to follow little by little in your podcasting footsteps.
Congratulations to you on 300 episodes.
Gordon, congratulations on 300 episodes of your podcast. That's such an amazing milestone. You've been a virtual mentor to many people, and your podcast is a fantastic resource that keeps going strong. Well done, my friend.
Hi, Gordon. This is Julie Harris from the Therapy for Your Money podcast. I am so excited that you have reached the 300 episode mark. What an amazing accomplishment. Gordon, you just have such a special place in my heart. You are such a kind soul. You are so helpful to everyone around you. And the Practice of Therapy was one of the very first podcasts that I was on. And so you will always have this very special place in my heart. I really think that my love of being on podcasts and love of podcasting did start with you because you're just so enthusiastic about it. You're such a great podcast host. You made it so easy for guests to talk to you. So congratulations to you, Gordon, and I wish you continued success with the podcast and at least another 300 episodes.
James Marland here from the Scaling Therapy Practice podcast. I wanted to give a shout out to Gordon Brewer for 300 episodes. What an accomplishment. Just your faithfulness and consistency and kindness to the community and to myself. I have a short story about Gordon. I met him at a conference, had some dinner with him or lunch or something, and we talked, and he just shared about his history. And a few months later, I emailed him and I had a question. I had a question about email services, and I'm like, Gordon does really good email and he's always on top of it, and I get lots of good things through his email. What service does he use? So I decided to just send up a flyer to this person I met once and say, hey, what email service do you use? And he emailed me back and he gave me a couple good recommendations. We had a couple good email exchanges. And I just thought that was so awesome that Gordon, he'd met me once and it was months ago, and he took time to help and to do things. And that's just who Gordon is. He's just a faithful servant to the community. And it's one of the reasons why I am podcasting today, because of the help and support of Gordon and his network. Thank you so much, Gordon. And here's to the next 300.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. This is Gordon, and this is episode number 300. It's hard to really kind of get my head around the fact that we are at episode number 300. And when I started this podcast back in 2017, it was really just on a whim, just thinking, okay, this sounds fun. I'll give it a try and see what happens. And so here we are this many years later, and the podcast is still going strong. You know, I was just looking at the stats. I was just curious. I don't look at them that often, but we're averaging a little over 7,000 downloads a month, which is pretty good for a podcast. And also we've had well over 300,000 downloads total since we started. So big thanks to you all that are listening for supporting us and by just listening and interacting with us in the various ways in which people interact, either through our website or on social media, all of those different ways, and in our circle community. I'm grateful to you for being a listener. I'm glad you're with me on this journey, as I like to say. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and a big thanks to all the folks that have sent their best wishes that you heard here earlier. And yeah, I'm just excited about all of this, still excited about all of this, and looking forward to what the future brings. You know, the one thing I know about podcasting, in particular this format where I get to interview people, I've got to meet just some incredible people over the years. And I've really forged a lot of meaningful relationships out of this podcast. You know, I think about my group of peeps or friends just in the therapy community, and most all of them came out of my connections with the podcast. So thanks again for being with me on this journey. Well, with this particular special episode, I'm really excited again to have back on the podcast the one and only Mike Michalowicz. And so if you don't know who Mike Michalowicz is, just look him up. Mike Michalowicz is really kind of best known for his book, Profit First. And I first met Mike early on in the course of this podcast. If you'll go back and look at episodes number 49 and 50. So that was really in the early days. But the kind of the story behind that is that I had just gotten through reading Profit First, and quick shout out to Casey Compton, who's been on the podcast several times. But Casey introduced the book to me through another podcast, and so I got the book Profit First. And after I read it, I was really pumped up about it and really excited about it. And so just on a whim, I reached out to Mike Michalowicz's team, and really not expecting any kind of result from that. But within 20 minutes after I had emailed them, they said, Mike would love to be on your podcast. And so with that, I was feeling pretty intimidated. And I thought, well, I'm going to get somebody to kind of do a co-interview with me. So I reached out to Casey Compton, and Casey and I did a dual interview with Mike Michalowicz on, again, episodes 49 and 50 of this podcast. But anyway, as a result of that, I've kept up with Casey over the years, and we've collaborated on a few things. And then I finally got to meet Mike in person this past May at Casey's event, Meet You in Kentucky. And he is such a delightful guy and just really genuine and down to earth, and is so smart and just really brings a lot of his knowledge just of business and the financial side of running a business, particularly small businesses, to our particular professions. But anyway, in this episode, Mike and I talk about his upcoming book titled All In. And with this, at the conference back in May, got to hear Mike. He was one of the keynote speakers, got to hear him talk about the concepts around how we go about hiring people and getting people for our teams. And so it's really interesting stuff and just a really different way of thinking about it. So I'm looking forward to you hearing my conversation with Mike. So, yes. And so real quickly before we get to that, a couple of things I'd like to invite you to do. One is I've got my good friend Ashley, who has been working on putting together some just some bling and wares and swag through her Etsy store. And I've endeavored to help her with getting that up and going. But if you'll go to practiceoftherapy.com/mental health wear and check out her Etsy store, she's got some really cute designs, particularly around the mental health field and just recovery and all of that sort of thing. And so this is my way of helping her by just letting you know about it. And also, if you are looking for some templates to help you with your social media posts, particular Instagram posts, my assistant Rachel has put together a great set of templates that can be used in Canva in creating almost a year's worth of posts. There are 50 different templates that you can draw from, that you can customize on Canva. But if you'll go to practiceoftherapy.com/insta templates, you can find out more about that. And it's a great deal as well. It's just $22 for 50 different templates that you can use to post on your Instagram pages for your practice. So be sure and check that out. So before we get to my conversation with Mike, I'd love for you to hear from one of the members of the PsychCraft Network, along with a message from our sponsor of the podcast, Therapy Notes.
Hey there, Daniel Fava here, and if you don't know me, I'm the host of the Private Practice Elevation podcast, where I share online marketing strategies and interviews to help private practice owners attract more clients and scale their businesses. The Private Practice Elevation podcast is part of the PsychCraft network of podcasts, and I'm super excited to be a part of this network alongside Gordon and the great work he's doing. If you haven't discovered the Private Practice Elevation podcast yet, you can find it wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'd love for you to join me as we explore topics like building an effective website for your private practice, search engine optimization, content marketing, and copywriting, as well as my conversations with experienced private practice owners about scaling a practice, outsourcing, team leadership, and all things that will help you elevate your business and create the life you love. Be sure to check us out at privatepracticeelevation.com for resources and content to help you in your online marketing journey.
Have you ever wished your private practice could run as smoothly as a well-oiled machine? Well, look no further, because Therapy Notes is here to revolutionize your practice. Therapy Notes is the complete practice management system you've been dreaming of. With everything you need to manage patient records, schedule appointments, meet with clients remotely, create rich documentation, and handle insurance billing, it's your secret weapon for a smoother practice. And the best part? It's accessible wherever and whenever you need it. Yep, even on the go. Imagine having more time for what truly matters, your clients. It's like having an extra set of hands, but digital. And here's the kicker. It's the very EHR Gordon relies on in his own practice. So, you know it's the real deal. Say goodbye to paperwork nightmares and hello to more time and better quality care. Check out Therapy Notes today at practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. Oh, and don't forget to use the promo code GORDON to get 2 months free. That's practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes with the promo code GORDON. Enjoy the show.
Well, hello, folks. I'm so glad to have somebody that you're in a big treat. This is going to be a big treat for everyone. I'm happy to have back with me today, Mike Michalowicz. Welcome, Mike.
Gordon, it's always a joy to see you. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah. And so for folks that are listening to this podcast, if you've been listening a while, his name comes up a lot, just a whole lot. And if you don't know about Mike Michalowicz, you need to, because I will say, Mike, that your book, Profit First, which you're probably best known for,
Yes,
was just a total life changer for me and my practice and hundreds of other therapists out there. And it's just been, as we were talking about the evolution of kind of how Mike and I met, which we can talk about that later. But Mike is an entrepreneur and an entrepreneur behind a $3 million companies. Let me say that right.
Yeah, it's a tongue twist.
Is the author of several books, including Profit First, Clockwork, The Pumpkin Plan, and his newest book, All In, which we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
And so Mike Michalowicz has been a columnist for the Wall Street Journal and business makeover expert for MSNBC, and he regularly travels the globe and is an entrepreneurial advocate. So I'm glad you're back, Mike. Looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, let's dig in. We're going to have some fun, I think.
Yes. So let's just start with talking about this new book. And I got to hear Mike speak on this at the Meet You in Kentucky conference with Casey Compton. And Casey, we have a mutual great friendship with Casey, but I was actually looking back at my notes from your talk. And, the one thing that stood out for me is just thinking about how we hire people, because I know that that's a tough thing for a lot of people, and particularly in our industry. And just so go, Mike, tell us about this.
Yeah, that was fun. That was the first time I delivered a traditional or formal speech on All In. And as of today, the book is releasing. It hasn't released yet. It's releasing on January 2nd of 2024.
Mm-hmm.
How the book came about and some of the concepts that we can dig into is I like to look at what an entrepreneur, myself or any entrepreneur yourself, what we want to achieve as an outcome and what's the common path we use to get there, but what's the data behind the actual results. So just jumping back to Profit First for a second, most entrepreneurs I have interviewed want to experience personal and financial freedom through their business. I'd say as well in the high 90s those are some of the objectives. So I looked at it, and very few people experience personal freedom. We're entrapped in the business. We work like crazy and absolutely don't achieve financial freedom. We're living check by check. So I said, well, how come we want this yet, quote unquote, no one is achieving it? So I look at the data, and with Profit First, I found that the foundational formula or method we follow is we take our sales, we subtract the expenses, and what's left over is profit, but there's never leftovers. The problem with that formula is we're told profit is a leftover. It comes last. And in Profit First, I flip the formula. It's sales minus profit equals expenses. So in practice, you take your profit first, hence the title, hide that money and run your business off the remainder. It's the pay yourself first principle applied to business. So when it came to All In, I said, what's the process we use for recruiting and retaining employees and raising the bar for our organization? And first, with recruiting, I noticed that the method we use is interviews. The traditional interviews, there's countless books out there, the great questions to ask and so forth, how to get your A players. So I looked at the results, and the results are abysmal. Less than 10% of the people that we find through interviews end up being great performers for our organization. We make extraordinary numbers of mishires and people who are mismatches, not ideal fits. And we kind of put a square peg in a round hole. So one of the strategies I looked at is, well, if that doesn't work, if that's putting profit last, the equivalent, what's the flip? And I found, and I shared this at the event, is we can do effectively recruiting workshops. I just call them workshops. It's something I discovered is prolific in the sports industry, but hasn't yet been widely applied in the business industry. Some businesses have done this with great success, but I'm trying to expose it to everyone. So just background story. In high school, I played lacrosse, not a big popular sport in the South, and it's not generally a popular sport, but it's growing. And I was a average to average minus athlete, but had the opportunity to go to a camp at a school in the Northeast called Hobart. It was back in the day, pretty famous for lacrosse. And I went there along with 300 to 500 other students. And we're out in the fields practicing and training, and the coaches are helping everyone improve. What was happening behind the scenes, and I didn't notice, that some of the athletes were tapped on the shoulder by a coach and saying, hey, you're showing some skills we'd like to help you with even further. Come to this field, and go to that field. And what they were doing is they were identifying the athletes with the most potential, the most desire and thirst, and helping them play and practice at even a more elite level. Well, at the end of the camp, Hobart, the organization, the school, had identified a handful of students who would ultimately become Hobart players. They were the best of the best. But the magic is I got better too. And so did every other athlete there. The workshop process allows everyone to improve, and the people that show the most desire or thirst to become your candidates. So there's an application in business. I think at the event, I shared Home Depot and their story. Yeah. I don't know, Home Depot is big throughout the US, and I don't know if you've ever been to one of these, but Gordon, you or I could go to a workshop where they're making birdhouses, and you bring a child, or maybe you just go on your own, and you learn this process. Now, there's a multifaceted approach. First of all, they're getting you to the store, so you're more likely to be a consumer. They're giving you a favorable experience, so you're more ingratiated with them. But behind the scenes, there's a couple Home Depot employees that are teaching who are also observing, and they watch for the participation from the parents. Who is helping other parents? Who's the most into this? And they tap those folks on the shoulder and say, hey, you've demonstrated such skill and interest. You ever consider working at Home Depot? It's a great recruiting platform. And this plays out in other businesses too. But what the lesson here is for any business, particularly if you're in the therapy industry, is run workshops. Now, it doesn't need to be a 5-day camp at Hobart. It doesn't need to be a workshop that's hands-on like Home Depot. You could do this virtually. And is there a skill or something that candidates may want to acquire that you could help teach? And just by their attendance and then their demonstration of acquiring that skill, you may pick extraordinary candidates. The last thing I want to share is you don't need to teach the stuff yourself. And so if you could find someone that has expertise in a skill, you could teach that. Make sure you invite people to pay to some degree because they need to participate. We're not looking to have this open class. Whoever wants to show up, shows up. They need to have some small investment to be vested in it. And lastly is, and my favorite part is, this isn't something you run on Indeed now. It's not like, you run an ad that almost no one responds to. Now you can go to your competition and say, listen, we're introducing a new skill. Send your therapist our way and cherry pick that way. You can go to workshops that already exist. You can go to adult education classes. And I got a lot on this, but my final tip is, if you're not ready to run the workshop, just go to a class where people are being trained on the people you want to, what you want to recruit. Go there as a student, but really as an observer. And now you don't even have to put on the workshop. You can find the perfect people that you want to bring on board.
Right. Well, the thing that strikes me about this is that it also takes the pressure off the people. You really get to see people acting more like their real self, so to speak. Yeah, in an atmosphere like that. I was just thinking about, and I know we've thrown this idea around before at the conference, and then just hearing you chat with other people about this. One of the things that has been successful for me in my practice is hiring interns, people that are graduate students. And and those folks are hungry to learn and that sort of thing. And one of the things that's great is that you can really see their people skills rise to the top. I mean, we can teach clinical theory, clinical skills, all of those all the time. But if you don't know how to engage with people, you're not going to make a great therapist. And so you get to observe that firsthand.
Yeah, you shared 3 words. That's the magic bullet: hungry to learn. And
Yes.
that's what we're looking for. There is basically 3 categories of ability that we should be looking for. And sadly, most businesses only look for 1, maybe 2, and they are the small factors. Factor 1 is what's called experiential ability. Experiential ability is something you've demonstrated in the past. It's something you can bullet point on your resume. And honestly, that's where almost all of the consideration goes when a small business is looking to hire someone. And there is some value. If they did in the past, they likely could do it in the future. But there's 2 other components. There is what's called innate ability. Innate ability is my natural wiring. So I may be a high energy person or a low energy person. I may be someone who's introverted or extroverted, cultural fit or not. Some businesses now are looking at those components more diligently, and that's great. They use Myers-Briggs or Enneagram or whatever the tools are out to evaluate that.
Mm-hmm.
But those 2 combined only represent 20% of the real opportunity in a candidate. The big one, the big fat one in the middle that almost everyone ignores is potential ability. Potential ability is what could this person do that they haven't proven yet? Now, that sounds so hard to grasp, but it's not. All you have to do is these workshops. When we were at that event together, I was talking about Eddie Van Halen. If you and I started the Gordon and Mike rock band and said we need a great guitar, and we should do that. You should.
Yeah. We should do that.
We should do that. I'm not singing, and I'm the tambourine, so you got to pick your instrument.
Yeah.
But say we wanted Eddie Van Halen. Well, we couldn't get. I know he's deceased now, but we couldn't get Eddie Van Halen. He would reject us and say, "Are you kidding me? I got my own band." He wouldn't even take our call. But when Eddie Van Halen was, I think it was 11 or 12, that's when he had initial interest in the guitar. So imagine we went back in time and we approached Eddie Van Halen and said, "Hey, why don't you come to our workshop? We're teaching guitar skills and would love to have you there." What's the likelihood he'd attend? Pretty high. Now, there's a caveat here. We didn't know Eddie would be Eddie Van Halen back when he was 12 years old. So what we need to do is invite all of these students and say, "Hey, we have a workshop on guitar, playing guitar better." But what will happen in our workshop is Eddie and the other students will first have curiosity, interest, they show up. But that's not a great candidate. The next level is desire. Desire is where they show interest in learning. They ask questions. They practice longer. They're the ones who show up first and stay last. And then the highest level is thirst. Thirst is where they can't quit it. It's part of them. And it would be very easy to identify desire and thirst with Eddie Van Halen and perhaps other guitarists. And early on, within a few weeks, I think we can identify we have a potential Eddie on our hands and invite him in the band. That's what we're looking to do with our company.
Right. Yeah. And that's, and one of the things too, is that I know in hiring therapists, we want to be able to see their ability to interact with people. And you get it firsthand when you do a workshop like that. I mean,
that's right.
Yeah. You get,
There was a case study at University of Chicago. They have a medical center. And what was so interesting about this, and I include it in the all-in book, is they were interviewing in the traditional way. Show us your resume, sit down, be interviewed. And the interviewer felt that she had this specialized skill to identify the best candidates. Well, the university said, we want to approach this in a different way. We don't think we're getting the best candidates. And there's a bigger backstory to that, but they ran a skill shop. And these same candidates that were interviewed went through this process of going to different workstations and going through and demonstrating experience. Like, how do you check in? This was for their administrative department. How do you check in a new patient? Now, here's what's so interesting. They had about 6 workstations. One of the stations was that check-in. And the person running it demonstrated a patient who has cerebral palsy. And she knew this because her roommate had it. And it's very hard to have fine motor skills. So taking out your identification, your driver's license can take up to 60 seconds or a minute. So what they did at this workstation is they had candidates check the person in, and she noticed that many of the candidates, or some of them, were very gracious. Some would say, "Please take your time." Other would say, "May I assist you if you'd like assistance?" But one candidate in particular was brutal. She ripped the card out, said, just give it to me. We got to move. And what was so funny, and not in a ha-ha way, but interesting way, was in the interview, that candidate who ripped the driver's license out of the hand was the best interviewer and was going to get the job, but was the worst in the skills assessment. What it ends up is someone that shows confidence and control may speak well, but it doesn't mean they can do the work well. So they ultimately hired the people that had the best skills. The retention rate was their best ever. The performance rate was the best ever. It proved to be a much better model.
Yeah. I know there was something an acronym that you came up with, Mike, called FASO.
FASO.
You want to say some more about that?
Yeah, FASO. It rhymes with lasso, and it stands for the 4 key elements for building an all-in team and retaining a team. F stands for fit. So just going through this quickly, is most organizations think a fit is a person to a title, and that's a mistake. It's a talent to a task we need to match. So instead of saying, I need a marketing director, say, what does a marketing director do? Or social media management, or whatever the components are. Write those down and then say, what is the talents I'm looking for to do this? Social media is someone that maybe is very organized. Graphic design work is someone who's very creative, which are very different things. Then we say, who are the candidates, maybe even already in your organization, that can bring their talent to specific tasks? What happens is we break out of that pyramid structure of titles and we go into like a web-like structure of matching talent to task. It builds much thinner, stronger, healthier, leaner, meaner organizations. So that's the fit part. Ability, we talked about with Eddie Van Halen. What we're looking for is potential ability. So I'm not saying disregard experiential ability. I'm just saying it's very insignificant compared to potential. So we need to lean into that potential. Workshops, virtual workshops, attending someone else's class or workshop are all ways to find people with potential. And there is a massive community. People with great ability, potential ability, and otherwise, in some cases, or in many cases, are already gainfully employed, but they don't know what else is out there. So they're not looking in Indeed, they're gainfully employed. Those are people who don't have a job right now, generally. Right. So what we do is now we enter a whole new community of people who are already perhaps gainfully employed, but don't know or don't see a path forward beyond what they're doing now. And you can introduce that by leveraging their potential. S stands for safety. We must have a safe environment. And I'm not just saying physical safety, that's mandatory. Imagine at any time someone may come up and hit you in the kneecaps with a metal pipe. Well, I'm going to be on edge all the time. So we need physical safety, but we need relational safety. I need to feel that I can be my true self in front of you, Gordon, and you the same way, for me to perform my best. So as a leader, we need to build an environment of honesty, integrity, and representing ourselves truly, authentically. And start off with a leader doing that. Do it in small drips and drabs. I wouldn't start off by saying, I got to tell you about my life story and all the things I messed up in my life. Here I am. But we may actually get there over time. And then the last part, O, stands for ownership. And what I found is many business owners come to me and say, gosh, I wish my employees would act like owners. So I said, okay, how do you do this? Well, you do it by deploying what's called psychological ownership. Psychological ownership is where you feel something is your possession, even though legally it may not be. So the example is, I own a truck, a Ford little pickup truck. And I take care of it. I wash it. I park it, exactly where I want. I make sure it's secure and protected. I get the oil changed and all that stuff. But here's the funny thing is I don't actually legally own it. The bank does. I'm making my installments. One day it will be legally mine, but it's psychologically mine. You don't need to give your employees ownership in your organization. In fact, that can even trigger entitlement, which is dangerous. What we simply need to do is demonstrate you have control over this. I can park the car where I want. You can personalize it. I put my dice on the rearview mirror, and you have intimate knowledge around it, meaning you understand the intricacies of how it works. If we give our employees opportunities to have those 3 elements, psychological ownership will kick in. Look for the keywords, the buzzwords, when they start saying this is our organization, or this is my job, or this is mine to take care of. All those things, my, mine, ours, all show a sense of ownership.
Right. It's I was listening to another interview that you did, and shout out to Whitney Owens and her podcast. But
she's great.
Yeah, I love Whitney. One of the things that I thought about is I've just recently reread Malcolm Gladwell's book, David and Goliath.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about is really giving the leaders need to have legitimacy. And the way that they do that is just what you talked about, is giving people the safety and ownership of what they do. And that's so key. I think in my own practice, I think one of the reasons I've been, knock on wood, that I've been successful in keeping people is that I give them ownership of everything that they do on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, if there's a problem, I want you to figure it out first. Don't come to me with it.
Right. It's yours.
Yeah.
And there's a subtle difference between responsibility and ownership. Responsibility is, I have an expectation for you to do this degree of tasks, and you better comply with it. What I was saying is, if we are forced to comply, we will seek to defy. I'll give an example with a rental car. When I have a rental car, I have a responsibility to return it with a full tank, no scratches, clean interior, and so forth. So what do? The second I go outside the rental agency, I'm doing donuts in the parking lot. I'm jamming on that brake when I get near the traffic light, and I'm flooring it when I take off. And that's because I've been forced to be responsible for certain things, and I'll seek ways outside of those responsibilities to defy it. Mm-hmm. Ownership, it's a subtle difference, but significant. Ownership gives the person control. Take care of this as if it's yours, because it basically is yours. The object becomes a representation of who they are. So when I assign something to someone and say, you own this now, this becomes part of them, integrated with them. Mm-hmm. It's a representation of who they are. And so what we need to do is just drive that point home, saying this is who you are. This is a representation of you, and award them or recognize them accordingly. But by giving them the control, the way they want to get to the outcome that we want is a big part of giving people ownership.
Right. Wow. Well, Mike, I know I've got to be respectful of your time, and we could go on for go on for days talking about these things. But one of the things I'll say, Mike, is that in reading your books, and I've read most everything you've put out there, one of the things I'll say is that you break it down into just simple, everyday kind of language that's easy to understand. And like I said at the beginning, when I first read Profit First, it's kind of like it opened up the understanding in a way. And I think what you've done here with All In, and I'm really looking forward to the book coming out, is really think about how we approach hiring people and running our businesses in a way that creates an atmosphere that people are going to will want to work for you. And
exactly. Want to work for you, want to work with you, because your business will be a representation of you collectively. It'll be a representation of them. I'm proud of the book, and I'm so happy you're going to be getting a copy.
Yeah. And so, folks, you're going to hear more from Mike Michalowicz, I'm sure. And it's been such a pleasure to reconnect, Mike, in this. Tell folks how they can get in touch with you and where they can find the book and all of that sort of thing.
Sure. So it's at your favorite, retailer, Amazon or otherwise. Mm-hmm. But the best way to get started, I would say, to go is my website. Now, here's the tip. No one can spell my last name. So Mike Michalowicz, while it's the tip. So here's the shortcut. Go to Mike Motorbike, nickname I was given in grade school, the only PG nickname I've ever had. So if you go to Mike Motorbike, as in the motorcycle, that will bring you to my site. All In, along with my other books, there's free chapter downloads all waiting for you right there. MikeMotorbike.com.
Yeah. And it's great. Your website redesign, I don't know how soon you did it, is great.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. It's definitely a different type of website.
Yeah, it is. It's great. And the thing about it is Mike makes all of this fun. And, it's just, I had a friend one time that said, if it ain't fun, it ain't worth doing. And then Mike just absolutely makes this fun and enjoyable. And so I appreciate you so much.
Appreciate you, brother.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Well, thanks to Mike Michalowicz again for joining me on the podcast. I really have a lot of respect for him And he's such a fun guy to get to know. And I appreciated the opportunity to be able to just hang out with him in person back in May. Yeah, and thanks to you for joining me in this 300th episode of the podcast. I'm hoping to do maybe 300 more. Who knows? We'll see. It's been a fun journey, and it's here for people just like you that are listening to the podcast. And my goal with the podcast is really just to help people find their way through this whole private practice journey and learn from other people and really connect. I know one of the things that's real important to me is just finding the right communities. So take care, folks, and take time to go over and check out all the resources at practiceoftherapy.com. And check out those Instagram templates that my friend Rachel, my assistant put together. And you can find them at practiceoftherapy.com/Insta templates. And that'll take you to the place to discover those. And big thanks to our sponsor of the podcast, Therapy Notes. They are the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers. They're who I use in my practice and just couldn't do without them. And I'm just always impressed with all the new features they're adding and just how they're making it better as we move through everything. They're my go-to place for running my practice. So take care, folks, and we will be back with you in the 300s. We'll be up to 301 at the next episode. Take care. You've been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the PsychCraft network of podcasts. You can find out more about the other great podcasts in the network by visiting psychcraftnetwork.com. And if you haven't done so already, please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com and get your free private practice startup guide, along with a lot of other great resources and webinars and free things just by visiting. Also, be sure to follow us wherever you might be listening to your podcasts. This podcast is intended to be educational in purpose and is not intended to give legal, accounting, or counseling advice. If you need a professional, find the right person for that.